At Christmas dinner, my brother found out I own a coffee chain valued at $90 million, and my parents instantly demanded I sell shares, split the money with the whole family, and hand the CEO title to Chase because he deserves it more than you ever will. I just smiled and answered with one sentence that shut the entire table up. Hi everyone, I'm Dominique Shaw, 36 female, and tonight, I'm finally getting this off my chest. For 20 years, my family never once asked what I actually do for a living. They assumed I was still the broke barista who could barely pay rent. Turns out I built something they never bothered to see. Before I tell you exactly what I said that night and what happened next, I need a quick favor. We've been losing a bit of traction lately, and hitting that subscribe button is the fastest free way to help us keep bringing you these wild real-life stories. It takes 1 second, means the world to us, and lets us keep this channel growing together. Thank you so much. Now let's go back to when it all started. Everything flipped the year I was 7. That winter, Chase started getting really sick over and over. Asthma attacks that turned his lips blue, pneumonia that put him back in the hospital 3 separate times in 4 months. The doctors loaded him up with steroids and inhalers and told Mom and Dad to keep the environment as clean as humanly possible. My parents took that advice and turned it into a full-time war against germs. They found some old medical pamphlet online that claimed older siblings could trigger asthma flares just by carrying normal viruses. From that day forward, the house became a sealed unit. Air purifiers roared in every corner, the furniture got covered in plastic, and the smell of bleach was so strong it made my eyes water the second I walked through the door. Hand sanitizer bottles sat on every surface like decorations. The rule was instant and non-negotiable. The moment Chase coughed, wheezed, or ran the slightest fever, I was gone. Mom would grab the same old blue backpack, stuff in whatever clothes were closest, and drive me straight to Grandpa Harold's place on the far side of the suburbs. Drop off, quick hug, and she was back out the door to monitor Chase's oxygen levels. Some trips lasted a weekend. Some lasted weeks. One stretch hit 26 days because Chase kept relapsing every time they tried to bring him home. I learned to pack light and fast because there was never any warning. Grandpa Harold's house became my second address. He never asked questions, just opened the door and heated up canned ravioli or grilled cheese. He let me stay up late watching old westerns and never once made me feel like a burden. But I wasn't stupid. I knew I wasn't there for fun. I was there because my parents believed my presence could literally put Chase in the hospital. Back home, nothing was ever about me. Mom's entire day revolved around Chase's medication schedule and peak flow readings. Dad installed hospital-grade filters on the furnace and a camera in Chase's room so they could watch him sleep. If I walked down the hallway too heavily, I got hissed at. If I dared sneeze, the backpack appeared before the sound even finished. I stopped telling them when I caught colds. I'd fake being fine, swallow coughs until my throat bled, and pray Chase wouldn't get whatever I had. Because if he did somehow, it would still be my fault for existing in the same house. They justified it out loud every single time. Chase needs absolute quiet and clean air. Dominique is independent, she's fine at Grandpa Harold's. She understands her brother is fragile. I was a kid. I didn't understand anything except that being healthy made me dangerous. By 9, I could pack that backpack blindfolded. By 10, I stopped asking when I was coming home. I just waited for the phone to ring, and Mom's voice to say Chase was stable enough for me to return. Most times, I walked back into a house that still smelled like a swimming pool, and a brother who got hugged the second he saw me while I got a quick go, "Wash your hands, you've been outside." Grandpa Harold was the only one who ever asked how school was or what I wanted for dinner. He'd sit with me on his porch swing and say, "They love you, Dom. They're just terrified." Maybe he was right. But terror doesn't feel like love when you're the one being shipped away every time your little brother coughs. The older I got, the clearer it became if I wanted a life that wasn't measured in asthma attacks and bleach fumes, I had to build it myself. High school turned into a countdown. Every A, every honor roll, Every scholarship application was another step toward a door that would finally lock behind me. I filled out everything myself: the Common App, the FAFSA, the recommendation requests. Mom and Dad never even knew the deadlines. They were too busy driving Chase to yet another pulmonologist or picking up his newest prescription. Junior year, I got accepted to the University of Chicago with a full-ride tuition room board, books, everything covered. I printed the acceptance letter at the library because we didn't own a printer. When I showed it to them at dinner, Mom glanced up from cutting Chase's inhaler dose and said, "That's nice, honey, but it's so far. What if Chase has an attack and needs us?" Dad added they couldn't help with moving costs because Chase's new nebulizer was $800. Chase just smirked and asked if he could have my bedroom for his gaming setup. Graduation day came. I wore the cap and gown I'd bought with tips, walked across the stage as valedictorian, and looked out at 300 empty seats where my family should have been. Mom texted an hour before the ceremony. Chase was wheezing again. They had to rush him to urgent care. No one came. Not even a photo. Meanwhile, Chase got the royal treatment at his own school. Teachers let him turn in assignments weeks late. He missed entire months and still passed because Mom wrote doctor's notes that basically said stress makes him sick. When he turned 16, they bought him a brand new Jeep paid in cash because public transport could expose him to germs. I was still riding the city bus with 2 transfers to get to my weekend shifts. Those shifts were at Millie's Diner on the south side, open 24 hours, grease thick enough to taste. I started at 14 with a worker's permit, pouring coffee, scrubbing tables, counting every dollar for textbooks and dorm deposits. The owner, Mrs. Alvarez, slipped me extra tips and leftover pie on nights when I looked too tired. My parents never asked where the money came from. They just assumed I was out with friends. I kept my head down, stacked cash in a shoebox under my bed, and watched the calendar. Every accepted student day I attended alone. Every campus tour I paid for with diner tips. Every deposit I wired from the Western Union inside the corner store. The day I moved into the dorms, Uncle Kevin drove me because Mom and Dad were at the ER again with Chase. He handed me $500 cash and said Grandpa Harold had been saving it from his pension checks. That money bought my first real laptop. College itself was freedom wrapped in exhaustion. 8 a.m. lectures, library until it closed, then closing shifts at a campus cafe to cover the extras. My scholarship didn't. I never told my parents my class schedule. They never asked. When I made Dean's List every semester, the certificates went into a folder they never saw. When Chase flunked his first year of community college, they paid for tutors and a new gaming laptop to reduce stress. By senior year, I was running on caffeine and determination. I walked at graduation again, summa cum laude. And again the seats for my family were empty. This time the excuse was Chase had a bad reaction to spring pollen. I took a selfie on the quad, alone, smiled for no one, and promised myself that from that day forward, my achievements would belong only to me. The month I graduated, I walked into a tiny roastery in Wicker Park, looking for any job that paid more than minimum wage. The place was called Bean and Leaf, 400 square feet, cracked tile floor, one vintage Probat roaster that sounded like a jet engine, and a handwritten menu above the register. Marco, the owner, hired me the same afternoon because I told him I could open at 5:30 and close at 10 without complaining. For the first 6 months, I practically lived there. I kept a sleeping bag and a yoga mat rolled up under the prep counter, crashed there when the last train left, woke up at 4:15 to fire up the roaster before the first delivery driver showed up. I was on my feet from 5:30 in the morning until 11 at night, sometimes later if we ran out of a single origin lot. Hands blistered from tamping, forearms burned from steaming, milk shoes permanently soaked in spilled oat milk. I tasted every bean that came through the door, bright Ethiopian naturals that tasted like blueberries and champagne Costa Rica honeys, with peach and jasmine Panama geisha that cost more per pound than filet mignon. Customers started asking for the girl who knows the Ethiopians and waited even when the line was out the door. I kept a black moleskin notebook behind the register and wrote down every extraction time, every tasting note, every ratio that made someone close their eyes and whisper, "Damn." After closing, I stayed alone dialing in new blends on the spare machine cleaning grinders until 2 a.m., just to try one more variable. Marco finally gave me a key and told me to lock up when I was done. Some nights I didn't leave at all. One regular Paul showed up every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 7:12, wearing a tailored navy suit. Always ordered a double ristretto in a ceramic cup, no milk, no sugar. After 3 months, he noticed the sleeping bag under the counter and asked why I was living like a fugitive. I laughed it off at first, then told him the truth: I was trying to build something nobody could take away. He finished his espresso, slid a cream-colored business card across the bar, and said, "Call me when you have something to show." I called him 9 months later with a 53-page deck I'd written on the red line between double shifts. Northlight Coffee, small footprint standing room only shops. Obsessive direct trade sourcing baristas trained like sommeliers, pricing 20% above market because quality isn't cheap. Paul read it in one night and introduced me to 2 angel investors the next week. They wrote the first check for $300,000 on a napkin at the very counter I used to sleep under. 18 months later, the first Northlight opened in Logan Square. 800 square feet reclaimed wood bars, no chairs, pour-over stations like altars. We sold out of beans on day 3. Location 2 launched in West Loop 11 months after that, then Milwaukee, then Madison. Every new store funded the next. By year 5, we raised a proper seed round of $4 million, switched to a tightly controlled franchise model where I still approve every roast profile and every new owner personally. And I finally moved out of the studio, above the original roastery that smelled permanently of burnt sugar. Series A hit at year 7, $18 million, at a $50 million pre-money valuation. Series B closed 14 months ago, $38 million more, pushing post-money to $90 million exactly. 9 stores total now, across 6 Midwestern states: Chicago flagships, Milwaukee on the lakefront, Madison near Campus, Minneapolis, downtown St. Louis, in the Central West End, Denver, in Rhino, Kansas City. Crossroads, Omaha, Old Market, Des Moines, East Village. Every location profitable within 6 months, every bag of beans still roasted in that original Probat I refused to retire. The White Peak logo on midnight blue is recognizable from 3 blocks away, and my signature is still on every new franchise agreement. I own 58% of the company, the investors own the rest, and my name sits alone at the top of the cap table. I never breathed a word of it at home. When Mom asked what I did, I said I managed a few cafes around the city. Dad grunted that it sounded stable. Chase rolled his eyes and called me coffee girl every Christmas. They pictured me steaming milk in some corporate chain, maybe making supervisor if I was lucky. They had no clue the girl they still saw in a black apron was flying private to close 8-figure rounds. I kept the secret for the same reason I once slept under a counter the day something truly belongs to me. I don't let anyone else put their name on it. At 28, the company finally hit consistent 8-figure revenue. The numbers looked insane on paper, but I still lived in the same 1-bedroom in Logan Square, drove a 5-year-old Honda, and wore the same black jeans until they ripped. I told myself it was discipline. Really, it was armor. That same year, Mom called crying about the mortgage. Chase had totaled his second Jeep, and insurance wouldn't cover it all. Dad's hours at the warehouse had been cut. They were 2 months behind, and the bank was sending letters. I listened to her sob for 20 minutes, then opened my banking app and set up a recurring transfer $8,000 on the first of every month into their joint checking account. I labeled it D. Shaw, bonus plus overtime pay, so the statement looked normal. They never asked how a cafe manager pulled that kind of money. Mom just texted thank you with a string of heart emojis and said, God blesses people who work hard. Within weeks, the overdue notices stopped. Dad bought a new grill. Chase posted Instagram stories from Florida over spring break. Life went back to normal for them. I kept the transfers going for 8 straight years. 96 payments, $768,000 total wired, while I sat in first class on my way to close another round. Every time the money hit their account, Mom would call to gush about how proud she was that I was finally making decent money at the coffee shop. Dad bragged to his buddies that his daughter was sending home a little something to help out. Chase bought a Rolex and told everyone his big sister hooked him up. Sunday dinners stayed exactly the same. I'd show up in Target leggings and a hoodie carrying a bottle of $2 Chuck. Mom would hug me and whisper, "We're so grateful for what you do, honey," then spend the rest of the night asking Chase about his latest job interview or new girlfriend. Dad would pat my shoulder and say, "Keep grinding at that cafe, kiddo, you're doing better than we ever expected." Chase called me Caffeine Queen and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. They pitied me. Actually pitied me. The daughter who still wasn't married at 34, who worked with her hands and probably came home smelling like milk steam every night. Mom set me up with her hairdresser's nephew twice. Dad asked if I needed help filling out applications for something more stable. I smiled, said I was fine, and scheduled the next transfer while they cleared the table. Seeing them happy kept me quiet. New furniture in the living room, vacations they posted about Chase, driving something shiny every year. It hurt less when I pretended the money bought me a seat at the table, even if it was the same folding chair in the corner. I told myself $8,000 a month was the price of peace. I could afford it. They needed it. And they never had to know where it really came from. Every Christmas, I watched Mom hang a new ornament that said, "Family is everything," while the ornament fund was literally my silent wire transfer. Every birthday, Chase got a card with cash I'd slipped in, and he'd hug me and say, "Thanks, sis, you're the best barista ever." I'd laugh along because the alternative was blowing up the only version of family I'd ever known. I wore the broke barista mask like it was custom-tailored. Hair in a messy bun, no jewelry, except a $10 watch phone with a cracked screen. When Forbes ran a small piece on fast-growing Midwest coffee brands and quoted Northlight CEO D. Shaw, I made sure nobody at home ever saw it. When the company hit the Incarn 5000 list, I celebrated alone with takeout on my couch. The secret became its own kind of addiction. Watching them spend my money while treating me like the family charity case was twisted, but it was mine. For once, I controlled the story they told about me. This Christmas, I offered to host for the first time in my life. I called Mom in early November and told her I wanted to take the whole thing off their plate: venue, food, drinks, everything. She started to protest about money, but I cut her off and said I'd been putting a little aside every month, and this was my gift to the family. She teared up on the phone and told everyone how proud she was that I was finally doing something special with my little cafe job. I booked the private winter garden room at the Langham, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a real 15-foot Fraser fir, dripping with crystal ornaments, heated marble floors, and a dedicated staff of 10. I ordered the full tasting menu from their Michelin-starred kitchen: seared foie gras with fig wagyu rossini, black truffle mashed potatoes, gold-dusted chocolate dome that melted under warm caramel. The final invoice was $38,000 before tip. I paid it with the same card I used for bean orders. 24 guests confirmed: Mom, Dad, Chase, 3 sets of aunts and uncles, 7 cousins, plus a few family friends who always got invited. I wore a simple charcoal cashmere dress and low heels. Nothing flashy, hair in the same messy bun they'd seen for years. Everyone walked in gasping at the lights, the tree, the smell of pine and truffle in the air. Mom hugged me 3 times and whispered that I must have worked triple shifts for months. Chase strutted around in a new Canada Goose jacket, telling cousins his sister had finally leveled up. The tables were set with gold-rimmed plates, fresh cedar centerpieces, and a custom playlist I'd cued on my phone earlier. Dinner flowed perfectly, champagne towers, laughter toasts to family. I floated through it, smiling, refilling glasses, playing the grateful host they expected. After the beef course, Chase announced he'd made the ultimate Christmas playlist and needed better speakers than the room system. He spotted my phone charging on the marble credenza, grabbed it like it was his own. He'd known my passcode since we were kids and connected to the hidden Sonos. A smooth jazz version of Let It Snow poured through the room. Then a push notification slid down from the top of the lock screen, large, bold, impossible to miss. Subject: Northlight Coffee. Final term sheet signed, valuation $90,000, $1,000 post money lead Westbridge Capital Sac. Closing Jan 8. Chase's thumb froze mid-swipe. The song kept playing, but the room went dead. He read the words out loud, stumbling over the zeros. $90 million. My full name in the sender field. Every head snapped toward the glowing rectangle in his hand. Mom's champagne flute slipped and exploded on the marble. Dad's fork clattered against porcelain. Aunt Linda actually gasped like she was in a soap opera. Chase's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and something that looked a lot like rage. Someone's phone flashed as they photographed the screen. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I felt it in my teeth. Heat rushed to my face, but I forced my breathing, steady, slow, controlled. I walked over at normal speed, took the phone from Chase's suddenly limp fingers, and pressed the side button until the screen went black. The music died with it. 10 seconds of pure silence. 24 people staring at me like I'd just performed witchcraft. Mom broke, first voice small and shaking. "Dominique, is this some kind of joke?" I slid the phone into my pocket, looked around the glittering room at every face that had spent decades thinking I was the family failure, and answered the only way I could. "No, Mom. It's not a joke." Dad slammed his whiskey glass so hard it cracked. The heavy crystal split straight down the side, whiskey, and blood mixing on his knuckles as the base shattered against the marble. He didn't even flinch. He was on his feet, chair crashing backward, veins bulging in his neck. $90 million, he roared. "You've been hiding $90 million while your mother and I killed ourselves, paying for Chase's doctors. While we thought you were eating ramen in some studio apartment." Mom's hands flew to her face, tears spilling instantly. "All those times I sent you care packages because I thought you were struggling. You let me believe that. You let me worry myself sick over my own daughter." Chase stood up so fast his plate flipped. Gravy splattered across the white tablecloth. "This is insane. $90 million. You owe us, Dominique. You owe us everything. I want $20 million today, wired to start my own chain. You'll back me, you'll mentor me, you'll make me the face of luxury coffee. It's the least you can do after hogging all of this." Aunt Linda was already nodding furiously. "She needs to sell at least 30% and distribute it fairly among family. That's what decent people do." Uncle Ray pounded the table. "Put Chase in charge. The kid's got natural charisma. Customers would love him as CEO. He'd take Northlight global in a year." Cousin Megan pulled out her phone, scrolling. "I just looked it up. $90 million valuation means she could cash out $20-30 million tomorrow and never feel it. We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for what's right." Another cousin chimed in. "Set up trusts for the kids, buy Mom and Dad that condo in Naples they always wanted. Give Chase the capital he deserves. You've had your fun playing boss. Time to share." The noise doubled. Voices overlapped, demands got louder. Someone suggested I step down completely so Chase could run it properly. Someone else said I should pay off every relative's mortgage as a Christmas miracle. Mom was sobbing that I'd betrayed the family by letting them struggle while I played billionaire. Dad pointed a shaking finger at me. "You will call your investors first thing tomorrow and start liquidating. That money belongs to all of us. We raised you. We deserve this." Chase stepped right up to my face. Make me CEO by January 1st, or I go to every newspaper, every podcast, every TikTok influencer in Chicago, and tell them how my greedy sister built an empire on the backs of her suffering family. Your choice. The entire room leaned forward, waiting for me to break to apologize to hand over the keys. I looked at Dad's bleeding hand, Mom's ruined mascara, Chase's smug face, every cousin already calculating their cut. And I smiled the calmest smile I'd ever worn. Northlight Coffee is 20 years of sleeping under counters, of missing birthdays and funerals, of choosing payroll over vacations, of learning to roast beans at 4 a.m. while the rest of you slept. It's every dollar I never spent on myself, every relationship I never had, every tear I swallowed, so I could sign another lease. It is not your inheritance to divide. It is not your promotion to hand out. It is not your story to rewrite. It's mine. And I'm done paying for the privilege of being invisible in my own family. You could have heard a snowflake land. 3 days later, they showed up at headquarters unannounced. Mom, Dad, Chase, Aunt Linda, and Uncle Ray stormed past the lobby security desk shouting that they were family of the owner and had every right to be there. The receptionist hit the silent alarm. I was pulled out of a board meeting and walked into the atrium just as Dad started yelling at the guards to get out of his way. Chase spotted me first. He was holding printed copies of the term sheet and waving them like a victory flag. Mom was already crying. Dad's face was redder than I'd ever seen it. They demanded a family meeting right there in front of employees and investors who had started gathering. That was the exact moment Cole Patterson stepped off the elevator. Cole, Uncle Kevin's son, 34, senior litigation partner at one of the biggest firms in Chicago, carrying a thick manila envelope sealed with red court stamps. He didn't raise his voice once. He simply walked straight to Dad and handed over the documents. Temporary restraining order signed this morning by Judge Ramirez. You are all prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Dominique Shaw, her residence, her place of business, or any Northlight Coffee location. Violation is a Class A misdemeanor with possible jail time. Dad tried to shove the papers back at him. This is our daughter, Cole. Didn't blink. Then act like parents instead of extortionists. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and ended the recurring transfer in front of them. 8 years, 96 payments, $768,000 gone with one tap. Mom let out a sound like someone had punched her. Dad lunged forward, but security was already moving in. 4 months later, the foreclosure notice was taped to their front door. Without the $8,000 a month they'd treated like a permanent allowance, they fell behind on the mortgage almost immediately. The bank sent the first warning, then the second, then the auction date. They lost the house in late spring. Chase kept his marketing job for exactly 9 more weeks. Then he posted a 47-minute Facebook Live titled "My Sister Stole Our Family Fortune." His company fired him the same afternoon for violating their social media conduct policy and bringing negative attention to the brand. Last I heard, he was driving for a rideshare app and living in a studio the size of my old walk-in closet. I changed every phone number, every email address, every account they could reach. Mom tried sending letters to the corporate office. They went straight to Cole. Dad showed up drunk at one store and got escorted out by police. The restraining order was made permanent 6 months later. In September, I launched the Northlight Children's Fund with an initial personal donation of $5 million. We pay for therapy, emergency housing, and full-ride scholarships for kids who grew up as the family scapegoat, while a sibling was put on a golden pedestal. The first recipient was a girl from Milwaukee, whose parents spent her entire childhood telling her she was less important because her little brother had asthma. Her acceptance letter into college is framed above my desk. Some people say you only get one family. Maybe that's true for them. For me, family is the people who see your worth without needing to take it from you. I built Northlight with frozen hands at 4 a.m, with tears I never let anyone see, with every sacrifice I chose to make. Nobody gets to claim it now. Not for money, not for guilt, not for the word family. Blood might be thick, but peace is thicker. And for the first time in 36 years, I finally have mine.